What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel and welcome back to the video. Today I'll be talking about some potential manufacturers that could join NASCAR in the foreseeable future. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. Over the course of the last couple of years, there's been some increased chatter about potential of new manufacturers coming into NASCAR. Now, the earliest we could get a new manufacturer in NASCAR is potentially 2027 because the bodies would have to be approved in September 2025 for there to be a new manufacturer for the 2027 season. So we're going to be waiting at least a few more years at least, unless there's been some secret stuff going on with manufacturers. But Steve Phelps and Steve O'Donnell have continued to state this publicly. There is a lot of interest about some manufacturers that could be coming in the not so distant future. So today I'm going to talk about some of those potential possible manufacturers who could make a jump to NASCAR in the not so distant future. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first manufacturer that could join NASCAR in the future is Honda. Honda has been the big rumor manufacturer over the course of the last few months. Or back earlier this year in 2024, around Daytona Week, there began to be a lot of talks and conversations that some Honda executives were spotted at Daytona International Speedway. And in late 2023, these conversations were starting as well. All these rumors were also coming around at the point too, because there have been some rumors about Honda potentially leaving IndyCar at the end of their contract in 2026. Now, in recent weeks, March reports said that the relationship between Honda and IndyCar has improved in recent months, and in recent months especially. But it sounds like there's also a chance they could leave IndyCar in the future and find their way over to NASCAR. And like I said, there have been a lot of rumors, speculation, and all that stuff around Honda potentially making a jump to NASCAR, maybe in the near future. Now, what potential possible teams could switch to Honda if Honda somehow does decide to go ahead and jump over to the NASCAR Cup Series? Well, obviously, there were talks about Spire Motorsports being one of those teams, but especially with Andretti getting heavily involved in Spire and with their GM power plant, and I think their IndyCar team is probably going to switch to GM in the future as well, I would have to think that Spire won't be one of those teams. What about an organization like Rickware Racing? Rickware's team's got a pretty big technical alliance with RFK Racing, but Rickware is a team that I can think of because they've got an affiliation with Dodge and the NHRA. Why not switch over to work with Honda if they decide to join? That could certainly be a possibility. What about Chip Ganassi Racing? Chip Ganassi Racing, I think, has expressed interest in the past about potentially coming back to NASCAR. So why not find a way to get Chip Ganassi Racing involved and find a way for them to be the team that does pick up the Honda missed stuff so they could be the lead Honda team? And what about some other teams in the Cup Series that may switch? What about other teams in the back of the pack? What about Colleague Racing? Colleague Racing is a team that I could definitely see switching manufacturers down the road, or we could see some all-out teams. That would be really cool to see. But I think that it all depends on what happens with their IndyCar partnership. If they stay in IndyCar long term, I don't know if they will come over. But I also think there's an outside chance and possibility that we could see Honda find their way over. Same thing with Acura too, because Honda and Acura are very closely working together. I could definitely see both Honda and Acura coming into NASCAR in the not so distant future in the coming years. The next manufacturer that could join NASCAR in the not-so-distant future is Hyundai. Now, earlier this year, I believe it was back in May or June, there have been some outside talks and conversations along with Honda that Hyundai could be in talks and conversations of also potentially coming to NASCAR. Back in late 2023, there was some talks, I think, of Hyundai. There's been rumors of Hyundai over the years, but one thing that has kind of hurt Hyundai coming in, and also Honda a little bit too, is a whole hybrid top conversation and talk. One of the things that is going to be needed for both Hyundai and Honda to come in is going to be needing a hybrid system. Hybrids are basically becoming a major thing in all of motorsports. IndyCar just most recently introduced a hybrid system. Formula One's had a hybrid system for years. Same thing, of course, is in IMSA right now. And I think that in the next couple of years, because NASCAR is working on hybrid powertrain at the moment, I think this could lead a team like Hyundai to come in. So let's say Hyundai decides to join the sport. What teams could work with them down the road? Like I said, Spire Motorsports maybe, but I think they're going to stay there. What about an organization like an other series, like the Extreme E Series? What about teams like, of course, Rick Ware? What about a team from Xfinity like a Sam Hunt Racing? What about a team like McAnally Hogeman Racing down the road? That could certainly be interesting. What about AM Racing switching to that team? That could certainly be interesting for sure as well. But I do think there is a realistic possibility because NASCAR stated publicly that they eventually want to have 5 manufacturers in the NASCAR Cup Series and across all 3 series as well. Hyundai will be that manufacturer that could suffice that 5th manufacturer talk. I think it'd be really cool for it to happen, have Hyundai come into the sport, bring some eyeballs into it, and I think it'd be pretty awesome if we could find a way to get a team like Hyundai into the sport in the not-so-distant future. I definitely think there's a good chance that Hyundai could find their way in, because like I said, I do think there is massive talks and conversations right now about 5 manufacturers coming in all together, so 2 new manufacturers joining. I could see Hyundai being one of those teams that all of a sudden decides to go ahead and find their way into NASCAR as the 5th manufacturer. The next manufacturer that could join NASCAR in the not-so-distant future is Cadillac. Cadillac has been being brought up quite a bit over the last year or so as a potential possibility. Now, obviously, they could join as another manufacturer, and that could be 2 manufacturers that GM has. This wouldn't be the first time the GM has had multiple other manufacturers working. They had Oldsmobile and Pontiac back in the late 80s, in the mid-80s as well, competing against Chevrolet as well. But I think of another potential possibility, them replacing Chevrolet. Chevy will not have the Camaro in production past 2024. They are tentatively going to use a Chevy Camaro S thing for 2025. They're just going to call it the Chevy. But let's just say in the future, we could see Chevrolet leave the sport altogether, and I could definitely see Cadillac being a massive and pretty big replacement for the brand in 2027 or 2028 if Chevy does leave. Now, I don't think Chevy is going to be leaving at least for the next couple of years, probably even the end of the decade, but if Chevy can't find a sedan to come into play because the car stuff is kind of out there and very fluid at this point, I could see Cadillac coming in and maybe replacing Chevrolet down the road. Cadillac's got a big presence, of course, in IMSA. That's another big thing, too, is they've got a massive presence in IMSA, which, of course, IMSA is owned by NASCAR in a way. So I do think that you could see a potential possibility in a way for a manufacturer like Cadillac to come in as just another manufacturer, be that 4th or 5th manufacturer. Yes, it could definitely be a replacement for sure. There's no denying that. But I think that Cadillac coming into the sport, I think would definitely be somewhat of a pretty massive win for the manufacturer as a whole. Again, I think this also could lead to a team like Action Express Racing coming back in. Obviously, Action Express Racing, what of course about Andretti, right? Andretti Global or TWG Global at this point, especially with their presence in Formula 1 and the Cadillac brand. I certainly see that being a pretty massive possibility and a pretty big shot as well. And seeing all the big teams like Hendrick Motorsports, instead of hosting Chevy stuff, like Kyle Larson and of course Chase Elliott and those guys hosting Cadillac stuff, that would certainly be interesting. But I think there's a really good chance and possibility that long-term down the road that we could see Cadillac find a potential way to join the sport as a new manufacturer down the road into the future. The next manufacturer that could join NASCAR in the future is Dodge. Now, Dodge used to be in NASCAR multiple times throughout the history of the sport. They were in the sport basically from the beginning up until around the mid-1970s to the early 1980s when they left. Then they made a comeback in 2001 with teams like Chip Ganassi Racing, Bill Davis Racing, and Everham being part of the original group that was part of that team. And then they left the sport after 2012 after Brad Keselowski won the championship with Team Penske. And they were supposed to be in 2013. They had a Gen 6 car ready to go, but obviously that, of course, did not end up happening. Now, there were talks and conversations a little bit earlier, I think about 2 years ago. There were talks about him coming back to the sport. NASCAR brought it up, I believe, in 2022, but those kind of talks have kind of died down in the last year or so, and especially with them trying to go to the electric side of things, which obviously NASCAR is designing an electric car at this moment right now for a potential electric series, not taking over one of the big series, by the way. I think this could lead Dodge being one of those manufacturers that does find their way back into the sport. It has been a long time since Dodge has been in. It's going to be 13 years in 2025 since they've been in, and it's by 2027 if they return, it's going to be a decade and a half since they've come back in. But I think you look for some teams, like the Haas factory team down the road, if they don't switch to Toyota. I could see this being one of the teams that does find their way to switch over to the Dodge brand. I can see, because there were rumors of Super Haas Racing at one point switching, now of course they're closed. But I think there's a lot of things that could be changing down the road, and I think Dodge coming back into the NASCAR would be really, really exciting and really, really fun. I could see it being one of the manufacturers that finds their way back in the sport in the not-so-distant, in the not-so-near future, maybe in the next 4 or 5 years. The next manufacturer that could join NASCAR in the future is Kia. Now, Kia is a manufacturer that I do not see a lot of people bring up as a potential possibility, but Kia is definitely one of the fastest growing brands in the United States right now. It's been growing in the country over the last decade or so, and they have a massive presence in the United States. If car manufacturers see a massive return on investment, they could come in. And I could definitely see Kia being one of those manufacturers that could bring a massive presence and be a really, really big thing for the sport overall. Obviously, Kia has been, I think, growing their presence in motorsports, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're in Formula E, I'm pretty sure. And they do have massive presence in other things currently at the moment as well. I think there's definitely a really great chance and opportunity that this is going to be one of those manufacturers that's in talks and conversations in NASCAR, especially in an all-electric series down the road. I could also see that being a really good possibility of them potentially making their way in. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the Kia brand. But I do think, like I said, that Kia will be one of those manufacturers that will be one to watch, especially in the manufacturer race to get in the sport if we do find a way to get a new manufacturer. But I do think Kia will find a potential possibility and a pretty great way to find a presence into the sport. I think you will be seeing Kia as a potential manufacturer to join the sport in the not-so-distant future. Not sure which teams those will switch over to this manufacturer if they do decide to finally go ahead and get in the sport in the near and not-so-distant future. The next manufacturer that could join the sport is BMW. Now, NASCAR obviously is interested in going overseas and going to Europe in a way. And I think they would like to attract a manufacturer from Europe. And one of those manufacturers I think of is BMW. Now, BMW does, I believe, have a GT car currently at the moment, but also they have a massive presence in IMSA right now. And IMSA, like I said, is owned by NASCAR. I think it'd be really cool to have a German-based company find their way into the sport, especially if NASCAR, like I said, does find their way to go to Europe in the future and race in like Le Mans, race in other tracks like Bathurst, not Bathurst, that's in Australia, but going racing maybe at Brands Hatch down the road or going and race in Germany like at the Nürburgring circuit and seeing a BMW and NASCAR be part of it. I think that'd be really, really cool. But I think the one way you would convince BMW is the IMSA side of things. There's a huge IMSA group over there, and I think that you could find a way to see a team like Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing find their way over to be part of the sport. I think there is a good chance that you're going to see BMW, in a sense, in the next decade or so, find their way into the sport. They are growing their motorsports portfolio. They're winning races in IMSA now at the top level of class. And I think with all that success that they've had as well, I think you may end up seeing BMW here in the near future being one of those manufacturers that could find their way in. I think it'd be really cool for BMW to join the sport. And I really hope that we get to see BMW as a new manufacturer in the not-so-distant future find their way into the sport. And the final manufacturer we're talking about today is Nissan. Nissan is one of those manufacturers that we have also heard, I think in the past as well, about a potential possibility of coming into motorsports in a pretty big way. Now, Nissan, shockingly, they were in a motorsports, I think, a lot more along with Mazda not too long ago, and I thought Mazda would be one of those manufacturers that could find their way in. But Nissan's talks of being in other motorsports have also kind of died down a little bit as well. But I think Nissan has 3 trucks available. They have a truck available, they have an Xfinity car available, and of course they have a Cup car available, which could lead to them potentially down the road finding their way into the sport. I think Nissan is one of those manufacturers that we should try to take advantage of as a potential manufacturer to find their way into the sport. Now, not exactly which teams could go over there and work with Nissan down the road to find their way into the sport, but I think at the end of the day, if we could find a way to get the Nissan branding into NASCAR, I think that'd be pretty excellent and really fun for the sport as a whole. So I definitely would keep an eye on that for sure, and I do think you'll have to watch out for Nissan, because I do think there's a very good chance and strong possibility that if things work out, Nissan could find their way into the sport in the not-so-distant future. So those are some manufacturers that I'm thinking of that could be potential possibilities to join NASCAR down the road. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Let's get below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What manufacturers do you think are going to join the sport in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, you're either going to see a NASCAR news video or a silly season update. I'm kind of leaning toward the silly season update tomorrow. Tuesday will probably be a NASCAR news video discussing over the course of the last week or so. Wednesday will probably be another NASCAR news video potentially as well, unless, of course, we have a lot of chaos happen. Trackhouse preview will be coming this week as well. We've got some other big content dropping as we get closer to Christmas, as we close out the remainder of the year, and we get the final silly season rides decided. We'll be talking about, of course, Jordan Anderson Racing, Chandler Smith this week. We'll be talking, of course, about potentially Haley Dean, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, the lawsuit as well with 2011 in front row, Noah Gragson too, and a lot of other big things they'll be talking about as we close out in Junior Motorsports as well in Connors Village. We're talking about all these things as we close out the remainder of the year. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.